Hi, and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Today on the show, we have Sharon Batista. She's a psychiatrist and she wrote the Kevin MD article, 7 Tips to Balance Family and Professional Needs During the Pandemic. Sharon, welcome to the show.
Oh my God, thank you for having me. It's so awesome to be here.
So we'll get into your article in a little bit, but first off, can you share your story and your journey to where you are today?
In a nutshell, I'm a board certified psychiatrist, trained in New York, living in New York, in private practice on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. And I've been doing that for, oh my God, like 10 years now, and really been through a lot, and I think thriving, enjoying it, but been through a lot of growth and a lot of change in that time. I've been teaching on the side, just volunteering and doing some other things in the community to try to help out and stay up to speed and involved. But my private practice is my livelihood, my pretty much professional everything, I'll call it, and something I'm super proud of, being both a business owner and a medical professional.
Great. And how has the pandemic affected your psychiatry practice?
How hasn't it affected my practice? And maybe that goes for many of us. Being a solo practice owner and business owner, I've seen a lot of changes even financially and otherwise, because some of my patients are worried or can't afford their care, worried what's coming next in the economy. Some of my patients have had job loss, meaning also insurance loss or insurance coverage changes. And all of these things have had a huge ripple effect. Some people have not been getting care who need care. Some people are getting more care now, finally, as I think there's like a bit of a moment of respite later now in the pandemic. But in March and April, I had tremendous loss of, I'll call it business, even though it's a kind of like more cold word for it. But I was not seeing so many patients as we were all kind of isolating and just watching and waiting to see what was going to happen in our world. And being in New York was hit so hard. Many people I know of were sick or worried about getting sick, understandably, and it just had a tremendous negative effect on the health of my practice. If you want to talk about the business side for a second. And of course, on a more personal side or clinical side, it's been stressful. We're kind of all in it together, but we're all affected differently. And so navigating that was a huge game changer. Like, the world was kind of normal before that, whatever that means, like in terms of our lifestyle, what we thought was going to happen from one day to another. And then come mid-March, most of us didn't really know what to expect, myself included.
And we're speaking towards the end of October. Are you seeing patients live, or are you still seeing patients virtually, or right now it's a blend between the two?
Right. That's a great question. I know colleagues who are doing both, or even doing seeing patients in person exclusively, although that's the minority in terms of what I've observed. Myself personally, I'm only seeing patients by telemedicine at this time. I just don't feel it's warranted. My practice is in the city. To have people have to be taking the subway to come see me, waiting in the waiting area, that kind of thing, it's an unnecessary exposure, but that's my personal take on it. And I also feel, because my practice involves both whether it's assessing medically, medication management, or doing psychotherapy, like talking with a mask for 10, 12 hours a day would be really fatiguing for me personally and prevent me from really expressing myself, and maybe my patients from expressing themselves if I have to wear PPE for their sessions. So I made the call to stay telemedicine for the time being, and probably for the foreseeable future into the winter, to stay telemedicine 100%.
Now, for those other clinicians who are also seeing patients virtually, what's the number one tip that you've learned over the last few months that you could share with them?
I would say to pace yourself a little bit. It's really easy living I'll call it Zoom life, as I like to say, or the COVID life, to just like schedule yourself in some unlimited way where you're working multiple hours in a row, no break, easy to forget to eat breakfast, myself included, have a drink, get up, stretch your legs. We don't have our commutes anymore. We don't have these times of day where we naturally step away from the desk because we have to, or we need to, or we're scheduled to. We have to get on the train to go home or drive our car, or whatever it is. So we need to build in some other routines
Mm-hmm.
to make this workable and make it more kind of human and normal, including moving your body, even for 10 minutes here and there, including a break for a snack, even if it's like a tiny thing. Like I have a carton of blueberries right here that you can't see. Well, I could show you.
Sure.
And like, hey, it's there for a reason. It's there because I don't want a chance of forgetting to give myself a little nutrition so I can keep on going. But then having a real break is important too. Having an end time in your day, having a time that like is off limits and that's just for you or your family, if you have a family or whatever it is. And that's important too.
Great. So let's transition into your Kevin MD article, 7 tips to balance family and professional needs during the pandemic. Now, for those who haven't read your article, can you just walk my audience through it and maybe share the story of why you decided to write it?
Writing a blog post is pretty new to me, to be totally honest, and something I thought about and sort of maybe said, oh, maybe one day, and never gotten around to it. And I've written before professionally, but for journals, I have a book, but these major life changes that we've all been going through, and myself personally, were weighing on me during the pandemic over this time. And one thing is the shock of March and April, and then as time went on, just kind of like the gradual shifts month to month, and how it was wearing on us, me and as a family, our family. And I'm not saying my situation is unique per se, but I felt an urge to kind of share that or get the message out, and connect with people on these levels that I have, like how I'm affected as a business owner, as a physician, like, potential frontline worker, although I'm not currently on the front line per se, seeing patients in person. And as a mother, I'm a mother of 2 very young kids. And that's by itself a whole thing and very stressful in a time like this. So I felt that being a part of this thing that we're all going through, but we're affected differently, I wanted to express that. Mm-hmm. And then I am at the same time a part of a group of women physicians called the American Medical Women's Association. And our mission is to be the professional home to support women doctors, including in these areas of like career advancement, work-life balance, but now also including in physician mental health. And mental health has been under-recognized as a concern for physicians, even though physicians themselves are impacted just as much and differently than non-physicians in terms of their mental health needs. And so I just felt that to get our word out as AMWA, our word out as me as an individual, connecting on these levels and finding ways to provide support was really compelling and mm-hmm. made me motivated to write this article for your blog.
Now, can you share some of those 7 tips with my audience?
Yeah, definitely. I'll share one of my favorite ones, sure. Which is one of the ones that makes me laugh the most whenever I think about it, because I wrote in your article something along the lines of like lower your standards, and then if you think you've lowered them, lower them a little bit more. Sure. And I might be like missing the wording exactly, but it's just the one that I come back to time and again. Being a working mom, I've always been like, yes, like can do is my philosophy, like can do with the extra activities, can do with the arts and crafts, even though it's only so much if you're working the way I have, that you can do just as one person, can do with making the meals, the laundry, and so on. And this is real life. I'm a human. I have laundry. But in COVID, especially, keeping those really high standard, high goals and expectations for myself, while before it was motivating and it was a feel good, during COVID, it actually caused me to feel bad. Because I was not able to meet my own expectations for our quality of life, for my children's happiness and fulfillment and stimulation. And so I had to start to kind of cut corners, but in a healthy way, and say, okay, you know what? The Instant Pot is the best thing on earth. Mm-hmm. It's like sliced bread. And I can throw a bunch of chicken breasts in there with a bunch of spices and then get some tortillas and we have dinner. And I didn't have to actually like cook it besides put it in, close the thing, let it go, and then open it later. Hey, it's not like the level of cooking that I'm accustomed to, but it's still food, it's still nutritious, it gets the job done, and we're not wondering what's for dinner. oh well. Same thing with takeout. Same thing with other conveniences. I've had everything possible delivered that can be delivered, I think. And while it's certainly a luxury and certainly there's limitations, spending time online, because that is still a reality in the stores where I live, that you're online, social distancing, limited capacity at some of the stores. Like, I'm not going to take someone else's spot. If I can afford not to do that, let someone else who really needs to be there in person do that, because like they can only get the things they need that way. And I'll get it delivered, cost a little extra, but hey, it's less time outside, especially with kids. I can't bring my kids to the store. So then what do we do? So less time spent on errands in that kind of way, more time on the internet errands. But it pays off. I can order the groceries at midnight when I'm like watching some TV and relaxing, and get 2 things done at once, and then it's done. Don't have to think about it. So those are simple things, but actually they've gone a long way to me feeling like I have a little bit more free time, since there's less free time in this Zoom COVID living situation.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges for physician parents, of course, is managing kids, with most of them being remote or hybrid in their professional life. We're speaking towards, again, the end of October, and some say we're at the cusp of a 3rd wave of the pandemic. Now, over the past few months, when it comes to, again, balancing life and your both your personal and professional life, what are some other tips that you could share with my clinician audience who may be going through the same situation as you are?
Honestly, perfect doesn't exist. There's no perfect balance. There's no perfect option. And that's been a take-home lesson for me that I've kind of implied here. But that is one thing. And so what does that mean in reality? That might mean that you're not going to be the perfect parent, or you're not going to be the perfect doctor, God forbid. And so I've had to be honest with some patients even, and turn some patients down in terms of some things that they've needed or wanted, and said, let's find some other ways that, like, if this was a year ago and we had our lives together, I'd be able to do everything you're requesting, and I'd be happy to help you and give you more of my time. But right now I have to stretch my time in a different way to make these different needs. And so that means that I can't, for example, see you in the time of day you're accustomed to. I can't see you in the place that you're accustomed to and the way you're accustomed to, and that may not work for you. And if it doesn't work for you, I understand. But there are some limitations. And so I think being honest about one's life limitations is one thing that I would add to the list that I didn't say in your article. And it's been really helpful for me to be really open and human with my patients, that I'm going through this too. This is pretty much, or was, I think, a nightmare. I don't know how else to say it for many of us. And that means, like, we're not superhuman. We have, like, real things to take into account. And sometimes that means that we've got to do that thing tomorrow, or like, let's check back in a month, or you know what, you've been doing really well. Maybe we'll regroup when you feel there's a need. And catch me up over email. And those are things that we may not usually do in clinical practice. We may want to see our patients more or do more, but these are different times.
I think that's a great tip when it comes to setting limits with patients. And as a physician, we're often not used to that. We always want to do whatever we can to help patients.
Yeah.
Now, how difficult was it for you as a physician to set limits with your patients, and how long did it take you to come to terms with that?
Probably like you. I mean, I don't know your situation 100%, but a lot of us were kind of in the crosshairs, I guess you say. And I get those expressions wrong all the time. So when it hit, even though we sort of saw it coming when these cases started happening, and especially in New York and California, it was like, oh, gee, this is concerning. Most of us were caught off guard. So most of us had to hurry up and make a plan. And it was a haphazard, like, kind of speckled together, with a little, like, super glue or something kind of plan. And then we had to figure out when that plan, was it a temporary plan? Because most of us, I think, imagine, oh, we'll stay home for a couple weeks, a month, see you later. I mean, I even had those thoughts. I was in denial. I was like, okay, see you soon. Well, I mean, here it's October, and I've seen very few people in person, a select few, but very few people in person in terms of my personal life, like family, for example. Luckily, I'm very fortunate. My patients were, by and large, they were going through it and understanding. And so I didn't have a lot of challenges of like being in conflict with anybody. Everybody was experiencing it differently. There were some crises. There were times where I was just like, oh my gosh, if the pandemic hadn't happened, none of this would have happened to you. It's awful. But we were able to work really collaboratively because everybody, including myself, like honest about what was going on. And I think also being receptive that if there's a way I can help, I'm happy to. Let me know what you think. Finding out from the patient, like what works for them, what do they need? Do they need a different option? Do they need another like maybe addition of a therapist or something? Do they need to see their primary care doctor because like they have health concerns that are going unmet and I'm the only doctor they're talking to? So wait a minute, I could intervene and like, get them some help. So keeping the communication open and flexible has been a real help. And so a lot of psychiatrists, I think, variable in how much we use other kinds of communication. Of course, we're in the Zoom wave right now. I was doing telemedicine before all of this. So I felt okay with that side of things. I was like kind of prematurely like, I've got this. But then there's other things like how much you're using email and how much volume there is and how much messages and faxes and all of that. That's standard in our practice to have these kind of forms of communication, but became more so. And so to be flexible about allowing people to email updates, for example, that like usually you kind of save for like their assessment in office, whenever you see them, even every month, every few months, like being in touch in that way. And these are non-billable ways, right? And that's a thing when you're a business owner, where you're spending your time, and is it on a revenue generating thing, or a thing that's just like a thing you do because it's the right thing and helps get you through.
We're talking to Sharon Batista. She's a psychiatrist, and she wrote the Kevin MD article, 7 Tips to Balance Family and Professional Needs During the Pandemic. Sharon, can you recommend any resources to my clinician audience that can help them balance both their personal and professional life?
Absolutely, I'd be glad to. One resource I want to recommend, and this is going back to what I like to remember, like I'm human. Physicians are people too, regardless of like tips, like easy tips and tricks. Like some of us are more affected than we think we should be, or that is called for, or feeling even stuck or in need of help. So whether it's professional help or it's calling colleagues, these resources are crucial. I found that going back to places where I have professional homes, like the American Medical Women's Association, I have an amazing supportive community of female doctors from all disciplines of medicine who, we talk, we're on committees together working on projects, including we have a mental health initiative going on, including about physician suicide. That's been a really great resource. I'm a psychiatrist, so I go to the APA meetings, connecting with my APA colleagues online. We've done some online meetings, and other colleagues, like local colleagues who are also in private practice, who own medical offices just like myself, and talking, individually and as in small groups, like how are you affected? Are you in the office? Are you not in the office? How are you getting your PPE? Are you stressed? How's your kids? Oh my gosh, where's your childcare? And just like touching base about how you're affected and getting support has been tremendous for me. And I recommend if you're not feeling connected, if you're feeling more isolated and disconnected, that's one way that you can get that help in a non-mental health kind of way. The other way is to take advantage, and physicians so rarely do, of actual mental health treatment, even if temporary. There's great treatment to be had. Yes, it may take researching to find the right fit for you, but getting a recommendation for a great therapist to be able to talk about these stresses, even for a few sessions, could be something. Or a psychiatrist if you think the medication can be a help.
And my final question, Sharon, what is your take-home message that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
I guess one of optimism in a way. This is an ongoing pandemic. It's I think a great adversity for many of us. And I just shared my story. My story is a little bit unique to me, although there may be universal things that resonate. But none of us is trapped, is I think my take-home message. Sometimes there aren't always immediate solutions, and it may be a matter of putting one foot in front of the other to just get through it until you feel like it's a time that you can really overcome whatever it may be. And I think with that, like there's always a way or ways to manage and figure out how to manage better. So whether it's, like I said, like holding yourself to like some softer standards, lowering your standards, making situation workable, giving yourself a break, a pause where needed, day off here and there. These are unusual times, so our same standards cannot apply.
Sharon, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. And thanks again for being on the show.
Oh my gosh, it's a pleasure. Thank you.